Okay, YouTube, today I'm going to tell you about the story of Mehnaz Zaman, who took the life of his family in 2019. This video, I will take a deep dive into the way his family was, their culture, the nuances. They did descend from Bangladesh. They immigrated to Canada where they, hope to have a prosperous life. Now, for those that know, I'm Pakistani, and the Bengali and Pakistani cultures are very similar. The only difference is that they do speak different languages, but they're generally all Muslim, and this video will touch upon themes of expectation from parents, how Islam plays a role in the lives of teenagers growing up and how parents try to enforce it, and also how parents try to deal with their kids who reject the religion. You could consider this the South Asian version of the Chandler Halderson case. Some different nuances, of course, but this case I understand better than I do with that one because not only was this an act out of arrogance and shame and embarrassment, but because I am South Asian, I guess I can tell this story in a bit more detail, if you know what I mean. What's also interesting is this took place in Canada, in Toronto, or in the outskirts of Toronto, the greater Toronto area. I've lived there. A lot of the times where this family hung out on Gerard Street, I've been there. I lived there for a year. I think I understand it pretty well. So if you do end up liking this video, please subscribe and follow me on Instagram. All the links are in the description. Like so many new Canadians, Mehnaz Zaman, he was a young man coming from Bangladesh. He immigrated to Canada seeking a better life for him, his wife and his children. It was the late 1980s and his parents arranged a marriage for him to marry Mumtaz Begum, and both of them moved to Canada. Together, they had two kids. One of them, the person in question, was called Mehnaz, and he was born in 1996. And then 2 years later, they had a daughter by the name of Melissa. This is the Bengali twist on the name Melissa. And their ethos in life was pretty simple. Education will lead to a good job. A good job will lead to money. Money leads to a good life. Mumtaz, who was the mother, she was quite small and she was quite the nurturer. She had long dark eyebrows and a very generous smile. When her and her friends went out for meals, she often picked up the check. She offered rides to friends whoever needed them and often took them out to Gerard Street. In fact, once a neighbor told her that she made him a curry and it reminded him of ones that he ate back home. So then she regularly made curries for him, looking after him as if he was her own son. And to be fair, this isn't too uncommon. Like in the Pakistani community and in the Bengali community, I use them interchangeably because, like I said, they're pretty much the same. Making food for your neighbors or feeding, three or four of your neighbors randomly in an evening, it happens. It's not uncommon. She was a stylish woman. She wore magenta colored shalwar kameezes, as they call it, the traditional garb from South Asia. Her husband, he'd like to wear traditional Punjabi clothing, and anytime he went out with Mumtaz and her friends, this is how he would dress. So let me give you the nuances of the father now, right? The father dressed in traditional garb and he worked as a taxi driver. He did taxis because of the lack of qualifications, the lack of education. This was the easiest job for him to do, driving a car around. And he wore traditional garb because a lot of the South Asian men that did come to the Western world in the 70s and the 80s, like my father, right? They grew up in South Asia and then they came to the Western world when they were like 10, 15, sometimes even 20 years old. So their personalities have kind of already developed. Like me, I don't really wear traditional garb at all because I was raised here in the Western world. So I'm not as in tune with my culture as, say, the father would be. You know what I mean? From being a taxi driver, he earned enough income to buy a house in Scarborough and then he also bought some rental properties. He bought a condo in Scarborough and then another home in Danforth. And it was the wife, Mumtaz, who managed and administered these properties, ensuring that they both had tenants in there. Now, you might think, well, it's pretty obvious why they bought these houses: buy yourself a property, get some assets, wait for the market to grow, and then sell it in the future, right? My guess would be, as well as that, for sure, my guess would be is they had two kids, so they thought, let's buy two cheap homes now. When they get older and when they get married, we can give them these homes and then have their kickstart in life. You get it? Now, Mumtaz's mother, Feroza, she soon emigrated to Canada also. And Feroza's presence was big in the life of the two children. As the parents, Mumtaz and the father, were working, Feroza, the grandmother, she would look after the children. And where this is particularly important is that if you send the child to daycare, for example, I don't know what the daycare situation was like back in Canada then, but just try and follow the train of thought. If you put the child in daycare, then the child is there 6, 7, 8 hours a day. I don't know. But if you leave the child with the grandmother, number one, the child is still being raised with the same culture. The grandmother can teach the child the Bengali language, the Bengali nuances, and also you save a bit of money. So the incentive, not only for Mumtaz to see her mother, but also she thought, well, I can't raise my child because it's too expensive. I need to work. So having my grandma here, she can teach the child the religious values, the Bengali values. You get the drift, right? And it was Mumtaz's outgoing, bubbly personality that allowed the family to integrate into Canadian society pretty quickly. And this is a very, very big point. A lot of immigrant families from South Asia, when they come to the Western world, integration is the biggest issue, particularly in Britain, because there's a clash now. Do we remain Pakistani and Bengali, or do we integrate into Western society? Because the values are different, right? I'm not criticizing. I'm not making fun of anyone. I'm telling you this is how it is because I lived this life. My family lived this life. So trying to find the balance has always been a struggle for all South Asians. And you're going to see what I mean by that as the story goes on. Now, generally speaking, the South Asian community in Toronto does have high expectations of themselves, and trying to keep up and ensuring family security was at the forefront of the mind of the parents. And within these expectations, pride comes into it. And for the parents, a lot of the times, they would spend the weekend with their friends and families, barbecues, going shopping at the bazaars. This was a lifestyle they wanted to keep. And the parents set clear goals for their children. They had to either become a doctor or an engineer, and that was the expectation for two reasons. Number one, the obvious financial benefits. They didn't get the education that they wanted or they could hope for back in Bangladesh, but they came to Canada. They're working like dogs, working hard, making money to ensure their children can then get the education and then, have a great life, as I mentioned earlier. But the second reason, pride. Moniruz, the father, had already mapped out the life of these children. His son Mehnaz was going to become an engineer, and his daughter Melissa was going to be a neurosurgeon. Mehnaz himself, he was a dutiful kid, boyish, with a bespectacled face. He was his parents' favorite, and his mother doted on him. According to his friends, he was always home, and his mother would pick him up from school for lunch. And whenever his mother was out and, hanging out with her friends or any social gatherings, she would always leave early thinking of her son, thinking, is he hungry? Is he okay? Let me go look after him. Little did she know what was to come. And when Mehnaz wasn't helping his mother bring in the groceries from the car or shoveling the snow off the driveway, he was normally preoccupied on his laptop. Around strangers, Mehnaz was quite shy, and when he spoke in a softly stuttering tone. He would always look down when he spoke, such was the level of shyness and, I guess you could say, lack of confidence he had. At school, he kept to himself. He was a decent student. He was enrolled in physics, chemistry, and math classes that would get him into engineering like his father wanted. And to be honest with you, engineering, I can't think of anything worse, to be honest. It's so boring. His friends at school, they spoke of him saying it wasn't sure whether he enjoyed these classes. It wasn't sure if physics or chemistry was something that excited him, but he would still come to class nonetheless and work hard. And with his other pupils in school, he didn't really initiate conversation. He kept himself to himself. He didn't date, go to the school prom, or any of the school parties. One of his high school friends said he was just your average Markham kid. Markham, just so you know, is part of the greater Toronto area. Essentially, he went to school, did his work, came home, and played video games like all the other kids. And when Mehnaz was accepted into York University's mechanical engineering program, you can imagine his parents were thrilled. And one thing I forgot to mention, engineering, being a doctor. I mentioned earlier that the father wanted the daughter to be a neurosurgeon, for example. Part of it, yes, it's for money and a good life. The other part is so they can tell their peers, look at my son, look at my daughter, look how successful they became. And my parents, Never once said to me, you gotta be this or you gotta be that. They just wanted me to be educated and they wanted me to choose whatever I wanted to do. And despite my ass eating skills, my parents never gave that as an option. One of the neighbors, speaking of Mehnaz, said, he seemed like the golden child. The parents loved him very dearly and they were very proud of their son the moment he got into York University. But his sister Melissa, on the other hand, she was the rebel, reckoning with the conflict of her family's traditional values versus the troubles of being a modern day teenager. In high school, while carrying a 92% average, she got suspended for flipping off a teacher. She smoked weed, she drank alcohol, and dated secretly. And yet, despite her defiance, Melissa was devoted to her family and to Islam. On one of her social media pages, she wrote, Allah is so forgiving. He knows everything and yet he looks past everything. Melissa was also exploring her sexuality, which caused further tensions with her mother. Once, when Melissa was 15, Mumtaz, the mother, threatened to cancel her birthday party because she did not approve of what Melissa was wearing. And what's key is the reply Melissa gave her. During this encounter, Melissa says, I don't care, the party's for you anyway. To which the mother said, you're so ungrateful. And this is the crux of the issue. Melissa hit the nail on the head. What she was trying to say, what she's actually saying is, Mom, you don't get me. You don't understand me. I understand you and I understand your values, but you have never tried to understand me. You've never tried to talk to me. You never tried to help me. And this show of having birthday parties and my son doing this and my daughter doing that is just for you to keep up appearances. And I hate saying that because obviously the parents are gone and all the blame is with Mehnaz the son, I know. But this specific part of the story I relate to as someone who has grown up in conservative South Asian family values. I've had run-ins with my father regarding modernizing Western activities, if you like. Well, it's a bit different for me because I'm a male, but if you're a girl, it's different too, right? Because they dress differently and all that kind of stuff. But I never told my dad I had girlfriends. I never told my dad that I drank and all that kind of stuff because I would get my ass kicked. Don't get me wrong. My relationship with my father, 99% of the time, no problem. All Gucci. And even today, me and my dad, no problems. If my father did want to get to know me on a deeper level, if Melissa's mother wanted to help her daughter, if her mother thought, well, this isn't in tune with our Islamic practices, this isn't in tune with our Bengali culture, it was the mother's job to speak to the daughter. And if you are someone who is from South Asia and you're experiencing similar problems, the best way to help your children, let them fail. I say fail, so to speak, because a lot of you watching this, you're thinking, well, they're dating, what's the problem? I know. I'm talking about it from a South Asian point of view. Let them date. Let them drink. Let them smoke weed. They're going to do it whether you like it or not. Let them do it. But be there when they mess up. Be there when they realize what they're doing. Be there, because that's your job. And what made it worse was that Melissa's father was actually even harsher on her. Whenever she would come home late, he would hit her. And in fact, the altercations became so vicious that the neighbors sometimes would call the police. And the father's angry for several reasons, which you can work out, but I'll break it down. Number one, shame on the family. Number two, he doesn't want his daughter to, whore around, so to speak, right? And number three, honor. With South Asian communities and with Islam, the honor is with the women. And again, you might agree, you might not disagree, you might have your own opinions. I respect it. I'm just telling you how it is. There would be some nights where she would miss her curfew. So the father would deliberately lock all the doors in the house so she wouldn't get in. So the mother would leave a secret key for her by the basement. And the mother would do this for two reasons. One, she obviously loved her daughter. And two, is because the daughter's behavior caused tensions between the mother and the father. The father blamed her. This is your fault. She's doing it because you're not treating her right, or you're making her do it. You see what I mean? The father would blame the mother. So the mother would leave the key just to avoid that. And there would be times when Melissa and Mumtaz would fight, and then Mehnaz, the son, he would intervene, to try and cool the situation down. But when his father would be home, and there would be even bigger fighting, Mehnaz would put on his headphones and just play video games. And Mehnaz, he discovered a perfect world, which was a 3D multiplayer role-playing game. And this is where he started to become disillusioned. Role-playing games is where you tell the game what to do. You are a character. There are a hundred and thousands of options to which you can do, and you can live a virtual gaming life. You can immerse yourself into this character. And just to be clear, I know a lot of you play RPG. I'm not saying you're disillusioned. I'm talking to him specifically. It affected him in a completely different way to the way it would affect you. So please, I don't mean it in a toxic way. Forgive me. And on a private gaming server, Mehnaz made a whole bunch of friends from Israel to Belgium to Tunisia, and they would all play together. And remember what I said earlier, in the real world he was quite socially awkward, but when you're behind the screen, when there is a barrier, you can be yourself more, and this was his arena. And as time went on, the Zaman's home life deteriorated. In 2017, Monirose was arrested for shoplifting from a Canadian tire in Markham, and I find this astounding. Who the fuck steals tires? The charges were dropped in exchange for community service, and then Melissa moved out of the house to move in with her boyfriend, much to the dismay of her parents. And Mehnaz himself, as he got older, he was becoming more and more withdrawn, even though he was seen as the pride of the family. The weight of their expectations fell firmly on his shoulders. To her friends, Mumtaz would always tell him, "My son is doing great. He's studying engineering. He's gonna make a lot of money. He's gonna have a great life. Wife, kids." She told him he was excelling in his mechanical engineering degree. He would always be at the mosque. This guy, this child of mine, is just amazing. But unbeknownst to her, Mehnaz became adrift. He was growing disillusioned with Islam and identifying himself online as an atheist. He started dating a girl. He started confiding in his friends, and he wanted a more independent life than the one he had at home. And he spent a lot of his time playing this perfect world role-playing game, and his friends will tell the police after that they would log off, go to sleep, they'd wake up, and he'd still be playing. And I wanted to say this at this part of the video and not at the end, but I fucking hate this expectation crap. Don't get me wrong, I want my son to be my early retirement, of course, but I'm never, ever gonna use him as a tool to make me look better to the wider public. Because that's what's going on here, right? The parents are showing off, look at what our son is doing. And again, I'm not blaming the parents for this whole endeavor. I'm trying to give you a breakdown on why Mehnaz became disillusioned. He was used as a pawn. He was used as a glowing tool to the world to say, hey, look at our lives. They are perfect, by his mother. But what the parents didn't realize is that Mehnaz just wanted attention. He did not want to be told what to do. Nobody asked how he was. Nobody asked, why are you feeling this way? Why don't you want to be religious? What is wrong with Islam? Nobody had that conversation because they were too scared to have it. And forgive me, I know I'm giving a narrative that this boy is innocent. He's not. He's a fucking idiot. But like I said, I've been in his shoes. At this juncture of the story, I have been in his shoes, and I know what was going through his head. So during his first year at York University in his engineering degree, he started to miss a lot of classes. He told his parents that he had a full scholarship and that he was getting excellent grades, but little did they know that he was failing his courses and he was signing up to repeat them in the second semester. And eventually he dropped out of school entirely and did not tell his parents at all. And this is where his deception started, and this is why he did what he did. Remember I mentioned earlier, Chandler Halderson? Well, Mehnaz was embarrassed. He was too chicken shit and too scared to go to his parents and say, look, I don't want to do it. So earlier I mentioned that the parents should have been there for him. They should have nurtured him and should have said to him, hey, why is this in your mind? Why are you becoming disillusioned? Because you could see it in his pattern of behavior. When a child is locked up in their room all day, that's not normal. And it's up to you as a parent to speak to them gently. You don't want to, cause any tensions. But this careless, pathetic, dumb motherfucker who didn't want to go to college, and that's completely fine, just because he was a lazy bastard, and because he was so insecure himself, he had to immerse himself into this online world because he was too chicken shit to face up to the real world. He decided and he plotted and planned to take the life of his family. But he planned it to a T, and it all started from the bus stop. He would wake up every day at 7 a.m. He would go to the bus stop where the bus would take him to college, and he knew that his parents or his father as a taxi driver sometimes would drive by this bus stop. So he'd wake up every day, make sure he's there on the bus stop in case his father ever saw him, get on the bus, but then get off early, go elsewhere. every single day. Now just imagine that for a second, right? Imagine the devious, like I'd be too fucking lazy. You know what? I'd be like, you know what? I'm not getting up at 7 a.m. Dad, you want to have a go at me? Have a go at me. You know what I mean? But do you know the sophisticated level of deviance you would need to get up at 7 a.m. every day just so your father could see you in this elaborate lie? You see what I'm saying? And in this online world, he was excelling quite well. And in the Discord server that he was a part of with all his friends, he was a really likable character. But Mehnaz in this online world, in this Discord, was known to have quite dark humor, and he would often talk about taking the life of his parents and killing other people. And his friends would just shrug it off as, this guy just likes dark jokes. I am part of a few Discord servers. I'm also a TikToker, as you guys know. These kids these days, mate, they take jokes to a whole new level. So in a sense, I can see why his friends would just shrug him off as, dark jokes. Mehnaz was also known to be a gleeful troll. He would go to many forums as a Muslim and then start speaking and spouting anti-Islamic sentiments. He said that his parents, their values don't reflect modern day morality whatsoever. And then a few months later, he was suspended from this Discord for making really offensive comments. See, Mehnaz, he knew that his parents would never forgive him. And that's why he could never tell them, or he was feeling, I can't tell them, they would kill me. Can't tell them that he dropped out of school. And when I say kill me, I mean in the metaphorical sense. So he decided he needed to find another way of getting out of this mess he was in. And he started to fantasize about taking the life of his parents. And this is how it went. I don't think initially he literally thought to himself, I'm going to kill them. I think he, in his mind, to make him feel at ease with the pressure he was under, I think he made up a world where they weren't there and he lived in it. So for example, let's just say he's sitting down, right? And I don't know, he's watching TV or he's on his phone or whatever. He would just contemplate what life would be like if they weren't around. And in those moments, he would never have to think about the fact that he dropped out of school. So initially, I don't think he planned it on purpose, but I think his fantasies in his mind ended up driving him to reality. So Mehnaz, he eventually told his parents that on July the 28th, he was going to graduate with his engineering degree. And for weeks, they had been anticipating their ceremony, telling their friends, oh my god, look at our son, we are so proud. But on July 27th, a day before this supposed graduation, he woke up with a searing pain in his stomach. His insides ached as he tried to eat. By this time, Melissa was studying in York University and she was working as a cashier in a local grocery store. And at this time, he was at home and his father was out being a taxi driver. And a family friend who later visited the home was probably best suited to describe what actually happened. Now Feroza, remember the grandmother, eventually she got her own place, but this weekend she was visiting the family and she was staying with Mumtaz. So the two of them, Mumtaz and Feroza, a mother and daughter, they were lying down in the master bedroom. And at some point, Mehnaz walked into the bedroom with a crowbar in his hand. He allegedly looked at his mother's head, lifted the crowbar, and brought it to make contact with his mother. Then he turned to his grandmother and did the same thing. And when he realized that their lives were gone, he left them there and he went back onto his laptop. And on like some social media forum, he wrote, I killed mum and granny so far, waiting for sister in 5 minutes and dad in 1 hour. 5 minutes later, his sister walked through the door and he hit her with a crowbar. He went back to the group chat and said, now I've taken my sister's life. And then around midnight that same day, his father came home. Mehnaz stepped away from his computer, went to the garage where he bludgeoned his father to death. Then at some point it's believed he went and slit the throats of all the family members just to make sure that their lives were gone. So then the police arrived. They arrested Mehnaz and eventually he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 40 years. Now you guys have heard me speak before about criminals who are in jail and that punishment is not enough. We don't get to see their suffering. We don't know what they're doing now. We don't get to see their pain. So what kind of punishment is that for them? But in this case, because I understand Mehnaz's culture, his background, his thinking, me and him had a very similar life, I know he's hating prison. I know maybe he's gotten used to it by now, but I know when he first went to prison, he was full of regret. He must have been crying, maybe punching the walls, contemplating suicide. Because as I said, this guy was the height of being a pusillanimous. He didn't have that relationship with his parents, right? His parents weren't the most approachable, neither was he. But that doesn't mean you take their life because you couldn't be honest about a lie. And I've said it before, what's going to happen? So what? You tell your parents you got kicked, you dropped out of university. Okay, let's just say they give you a slap. It's not good. They give you a slap. So again, what's going to happen? And I just want to say, I don't mean to offend anyone in this video. As I said, I've lived his life and I know I'm repeating myself, but I know how you guys can be in the comments sometimes. But I hope I conveyed this story as accurately and as honestly as I can. So why don't you guys comment? Tell me what you think.